fired, and then we also have some quarterback changes to go over. And then you're also here because we have the documents about the 5 best teams in the league. If you watched the last episode, go ahead and check out our bottom 5 teams, and we're going to bring in the positivity with the top 5 teams going into already week 6 of the NFL season. I am hyped for this episode. I'm fired up and ready to go. Let's preview some football. Let's go over some headlines here. Are you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock. We're already 6 weeks into the season. That just feels absurd to me. We're already almost halfway through the season, but this is when we start to realize who's real, when teams start to get hot, and when we start to see the true contenders appear. But without further ado, let's start with Thursday Night Football. This will be tomorrow here. We have a pretty much a game for the division at this point, like who's going to be supremacy of the NFC West, which we have the 49ers going to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. Right now, the 49ers are favorited at 3.5 with the over-under of 49.5, ironically enough. So, with this game here, right now the 49ers are favorited. What are your first initial thoughts when we think about Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, first initial thoughts when we think of Thursday Night Football is the 49ers are kind of in a funk right now, and they have struggled specifically versus teams within their division here. And then Jake Moody got knocked out of the game on Sunday. You have to scramble to find a new kicker, I believe, on Thursday or see if he can be healthy enough, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be out for this game. And then you're going to Seattle, which is another team who just had an embarrassing loss versus the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. And this is a team that's looking to get back on the saddle here. They smell blood in the water, and they've dropped 2 games in a row. They dropped one to the Lions, who desperately needed that game to break kind of the curse that they've had versus the Seattle Seahawks, because they haven't beaten them in over 5 years, at least in the Dan Campbell era. And then you lose a heartbreaker to the Giants. So I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to be pissed off and ready to go in this game. And I feel like the 49ers are a little bit just battle torn right now, and we're looking for a new division winner here. So right now I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks to win this game. Look for a bounce back game from DK Metcalf. I've liked what I've seen from Jackson Smith and Jigba, and teams have been able to run on the San Francisco 49ers team. So I don't think Seattle's going to struggle up putting up points. And the 49ers, have had leads versus the Rams, and they had a lead versus the Arizona Cardinals last week, and weren't able to get it done against a very poor defense. Well, the Seattle Seahawks defense is still pretty good. They had a solid defense this year, so give me the Seahawks in this game. I don't think they'll have any trouble putting up points, and I think even if they do fall behind, they're able to come back and almost win versus the Giants and send it into overtime. So I think the Seattle Seahawks are primed to take control of this division in this game and then give themselves a pat on the back with that mini bye heading into week 7.
Yeah, I think this is a game. I like that 3.5. I'm going to take the Seahawks to cover this game. I think this ultimately will come down to a field goal, but who am I picking? A team that played a really good game against the Lions, and then this past week, yeah, the Giants kind of took care of business, but at the end of the day, I don't think the Seahawks had a horrible game. Meanwhile, for the 49ers, it feels like they're losing momentum. They're losing their steam, everything you had mentioned earlier. So if I'm picking a team with the most momentum, a team that has the most wherewithal, the vitriol to turn things around, I also think this Seahawks defense with Mike McDonald is only going to continue to get better as the season progresses. So look for the Seahawks to shut down the 49ers offense to some extent. I think they can hold them below 25 points. Give me the Seahawks in this game. I think they'll be able to make some noise. I see a big game from Geno Smith, a big game from Kenneth Walker, and then DK Metcalf to awake himself because last game he did not show up. So give me the Seahawks. I think they cover the spread and I take the game.
Yeah, and I believe it was a Thursday night game last time that versus the Dallas Cowboys. Was that a Thursday night game last year where DK Metcalf went absolutely nuclear? I mean, he disappears sometimes in that 4 o'clock or 1 o'clock slate, but overall primetime DK usually rises to the occasion. The Seahawks have been a pretty good team in primetime so far the past few years here.
Yeah, they've been a good primetime team. They put up a great game against the Lions, but I think right now, as of right now, I think they're the better team. When you don't have Christian McCaffrey and you don't have all your weapons at full strength, I mean, everyone's hurt for the 49ers. So I just think they have the momentum. Plus, also, if they're in field goal range, they don't trust their kicker because right now they
Yeah.
have to use their backup. So I think that also gives competitive for the Seahawks.
Yeah,
I'll
you
pick them
also
there.
have to go for two. Like that's also going to be a problem for them. And then I've also liked kind of just the IQ I've seen some of the Seattle Seahawks players make. Like, did you see the play? Geno Smith was going on a run. Jackson Smith and Jigba was running down the field, and he was pretending like the ball was still coming to him, and took two defenders with him so Geno could get a little bit more space. Like, that's the kind of plays that are going to help the Seattle Seahawks win the game here, where it feels like Brock Purdy's running for his life in the pocket, but he really just can't find anyone. And I'm not sure what's going on with the San Francisco 49ers offense here. And it's kind of right back to square one before they had Christian McCaffrey. And he was really that Super Bowl difference maker. So you're not going to be the same elite team when you're missing, one of the best offensive weapons in football, the offensive player of the year last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jordan Mason's been great for them. I'm not going to discount him whatsoever, but I just think that there's a huge gap between Christian McCaffrey and everybody else. Maybe Derek Henry's in that conversation, but nonetheless. Then we go over town, over across the pond as we go to London for the second
God.
straight week. We have basically the London Jaguars taking on Caleb Williams and the Bears. What did we see last week? Well, the Jaguars woke up a little bit. They decided, hey, we actually can score points. Trevor Lawrence actually is an NFL starting quarterback. And then Caleb Williams, he had his best game as a pro so far, albeit against the Panthers. He looked really good, and they took care of business against the Panthers. Right now, the Bears are favored at 2.5 with the over-under of 44.5 over the pond in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Tottenham.
Yeah.
It's Tottenham. Who cares? It's England. But this game, Vegas is absolutely insane for the spread. I mean, you're favoring the Chicago Bears, and the Chicago players played great last week versus Carolina. And you may look at the Chicago Bears and you're like, yeah, they have better receivers. Potentially they have better coaching. Caleb Williams has looked more promising so far in his career at this point than Trevor Lawrence has. They have one of the most underrated tight ends in the league in the great 6'6" Cole Kmet on that team, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. I mean, D Swift has been playing out of his mind the past few weeks, and your defense has been absolutely incredible. You've been 8-0 at home in your past 8 home games. However, there's just this weird, inexplicable thing about the Jacksonville Jaguars playing in London, and I can't explain it. This is the same thing that happened with Urban Meyer was there. Did not matter. Last year, they beat the Buffalo Bills in London with the same Jacksonville Jaguars team for the most part. Like, the only different piece there was Calvin Ridley, and they found a way to win. They do this every year, no matter who they're playing. So, as a show that bases a lot of our picks on history, we're a very knowledgeable show. You are a self-proclaimed history buff on the show. It's like, how can you pick against the Jaguars in London? At this point, they should just move to London if we're going to have a team there.
Well, nobody buys their tickets in Jacksonville, so it wouldn't hurt. Yeah, it's still hard for. I know that you're right. Like, they have been historically good in London. In fact, I'm going to find their London record if I can, just to see how severe is it.
Undefeated.
But yeah, maybe record in London. See if they can find it.
Like,
They don't know
Blake
what I'm talking
Bortles
about.
was playing like Aaron Rodgers one time in London. Doesn't matter if
Alright.
it's Gardner Minshew or Chad Henne.
Okay, so it says it's 6-5, but something tells me that is deceiving because I feel like the last several years they've just gone crazy. 6-5.
Yeah.
Let me look at this record. This is they also had the first 6 London games. They just absolutely feasted there,
They played
But-
2 games in London last year, too, back-to-back weeks.
and they were 2-0. They're also 2-0 in Tottenham State, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I don't care. Fuck them. They have a better record in London than they do in the States, so I really think it's time they do that. Well, they have a winning record here, and I think they've won the last 4 London games. However,
Yeah.
I just think the Jaguars they're a team that have been on my bottom 5 teams this year. Something is weird. I know they beat the Colts last week, and maybe I should give them some hope there. I just don't think that lightning can strike twice in 2 weeks. I got to take the Bears in this game. I like what I've seen from Caleb Williams. That defense for the Jags is pathetic. You picked Daddy Longarms over Aiden Hutchinson. I'll never forgive you for that. At one point, you had a corner with one hand who was your starting corner with Shaq Griffin. I know he's not on the team anymore, but still. The Bears just look like they're just a unit right now. I really like what I've seen defensively. Either way, let's talk about the over-under. 44.5. Under. Absolute under. No way.
Way too high.
Especially at 6:30 a.m. for me. Fuck no.
I feel like London games are like pretty low scoring too, for the most part.
I see like a 20-17 kind of game. I think Caleb continues to build on last week, but give me the Bears.
Yeah. I mean, I see why you would pick the Bears, and I do think the Bears are the better team, but the Bears have looked much better at home than they have on the road here. They've struggled a little bit on offense on the road here, so I do think that could play a factor here as well, where the Jags are just fully comfortable being on the road in London. They've done it before, back-to-back weeks. They know what to expect. Nothing's going to be a surprise there. So do I think because of their team that they're going to win? No, I just think because of history, how dominant they've been in London over the past few performances, I have to go with the Jags in this scenario. It's for no actual real football reasons other than because the Jacksonville Jaguars are London's team.
You know what? There's going to be games this week that we pick based on history rather than on merit of the team. So I can't discredit you there.
Like
now,
what?
What's up?
Like what? What's another game that we're gonna pick on history instead of merit?
Well, I'm just looking at so we have like Chargers and Broncos. We have Buffalo in New York. I think there's a couple of those two examples specifically, I think, are games that I look at. I'm like, I'm probably going to pick the Jets. I'll probably pick the Broncos just based on history. But we'll go through those in a few minutes here. Next game we have Packers and Cardinals in Lambeau at 1 o'clock. Packers are favored at 5. Cardinals and Packers going through this game here.
What's the over-under?
Over-under is 47.5. Cardinals... what can we say about the Cardinals? Well, they beat the 49ers last week on a field goal. Got killed by the Commanders the week before. And then for the Packers, they beat up on the Rams, who are a little banged up. Had a come from behind. Didn't quite pull the win off for the Packers, but had a good loss against the Vikings. And then with Jordan Love coming back, I think he's slowly getting his feet wet, and now he's looking pretty good. Right here, I got Packers-Cardinals. This is going to be a fun game. I do think that this score might be closer than we think because I feel like these games are typically closer. Cardinals and Packers are usually pretty competitive. I'll pick the Cardinals to cover, but I'll pick the Packers to win this game. I'm going to say like 27-24.
Yeah, 27-24 could be a good score. I just don't see any reason or any way that the Cardinals defense would give you a reason to pick the score to be that low. I think the Packers will really see them start to rev up the offense in this game, where sometimes it did take a few weeks to get going last year, and then you faced a Rams team that was pretty desperate for a win, especially after losing to Chicago the week before, and their defense was playing as well as they could. But I think this is going to be a game where you see someone like Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson start to get involved, and then saw Josh Jacobs start to get his feet wet a little bit last week, and I just haven't seen enough from the Cardinals defense to give me faith that they're going to be able to slow down this Green Bay Packers team. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of like a 31-26 type of ball game, or maybe it's right within that 5-point spread. But I do think the Packers come out on top here, and I think the Packers defense has still been a little bit underrated so far throughout the season, where they haven't been the most dominant defense in the world so far, but they've still been slowing teams down. They still got all of the stops when they needed it versus the Rams last week. And I just don't think Kyler Murray, without a run game and pretty much just Michael Wilson and Trey McBride and if you can slow down Marvin Harrison Jr., you pretty much have stumped the offense there. So look to see the Packers kind of have their way on offense in this game and see Jordan Love light it up, potentially go for a 350 ball in this one.
Yeah, that defense for the Cardinals couldn't stop a cold at this point. So I do think the Cardinals will light them up. I'm just interested to see it. The Cardinals have the talent to score points. So it just feels like one of those offenses that each week you don't know what you're going to get. Just based on history with them playing close and competitive against the Packers, that's really my only sort of historical window there. 5 points, decent spread. I think they should be able to put up points, but we'll see. Still think the Packers are going to win this game.
Yeah, because they had like the Larry Fitzgerald game in the playoffs. That was like the Carson Palmer run, and then the Packers beat them when they're undefeated with Aaron Rodgers to take the number one. They were both 7-1. So where AJ Green forgot where he was in the stadium at that moment.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
It's kind of been all downhill for the Cardinals since then. Like, that was the moment that broke the Cardinals, it felt like, and they really haven't recovered since that moment. So maybe this is where the Cardinals turn it around if they can get a win here and shift the momentum back.
NFL works in mysterious ways. I mean, I think since that game, because they ended up going like, what, 4-8 the rest of the way. And then that year after that, they sucked. The year after that, they sucked, and not very good this year. So, yeah, I can see that. That'd be funny.
It's kind of the game that broke
more than 10 games. What?
That was really the game that broke them. And then Kyler had that abysmal game versus the Rams.
That was tough. 13 points. I think he completed like 40% of his passes. Woof, dude. That was tough.
Von Miller and Aaron Donald were really good that year, though.
That's true. Well, we move to a team we haven't seen in 2 weeks now. We have the Tennessee Titans hosting the Colts. Joe Flacco versus the great Will Levis. This game, I'll tell you what about this game. The Titans are favored at 2.5. The Titans are the best, worst team to watch. Like, they are not good. Will Levis, he is a very frustrating player to watch, but it's just can't keep your eyes off the screen. It's like watching a train wreck every week. You just can't look away. But Vegas says Colts have the slight edge with the Titans at 2.5. Thoughts on this game? Titans looking to win their second game. They did beat the Dolphins 2 weeks ago, so maybe starting to piece things together against getting a nice tough win against the Dolphins.
I mean, this has to be a dark horse game for game of the week, right? I mean, it's a rivalry game in the AFC South. You never know how those games are going to go, but you have a full week off for Will Levis to kind of sit down and think about it. Now they know that Mason Rudolph is a legitimate offensive candidate for them, where he played really well versus Miami. So Will Levis has that kind of notion in the back of his mind here. And then Joe Flacco, he started out really hot and he was really clean. Didn't have any turnovers at first with the Browns, but I think this is a game where Flacco may start to have some turnovers. This is a game where the Indianapolis Colts will be without Jonathan Taylor, and while the Titans defense hasn't been the best defense in the world, it's still serviceable, right? You still have L'Jarius Sneed there. You still have some dogs there. So with a full 2 weeks to prepare versus a divisional rival, and then you may say that Will Levis is frustrating to watch if you're a Titans fan, but if you're just not a Titans fan and you're simply just an enjoyer of football for the sheer spectacle of entertainment, Will Levis might be the most entertaining player in football right now, for the right reasons sometimes, because some of the throws, you have to admit, it's like, okay, most players in the league can't make that throw, and then some of the throws he makes, you're like, most high schoolers would not make that throw that he just made right there, where it's just a guy clearly sitting on a route, just have this crazy thing in his mind. So I think Will Levis knows he's kind of on thin ice here. Brian Callahan through the bye week. Learn how to not be dumb. That was probably his message for Will Levis. Get the mayo out of your coffee because it's seeping into your brain right now. I don't know if you grew up in a house with Connecticut where you were eating lead paint chips, and that's why you kind of make some of these throws here. But overall, I think this will be one of the dark horse games, and I will go with the Indianapolis Colts, but I think this will be an absolute fireworks show. I mean, Joe Flacco and Will Levis, I hate to say it, but Can it really get any better than that in 2024?
It's going to be tough to beat Joe Flacco and Will Levis. Well, everything you said actually gives me the wherewithal to pick the Titans in this game. I'm going to pick
Really?
the Titans with the upset. Oh, yeah, you talked me into it. Not only that, the Colts are going to be without Michael Pittman. That's a guy who is a playmaker for him. You lose him, you're going to have to rely on the Alec Pierce of the world. Josh Downs, he's coming back as well. But I think you lose a key player like Michael Pittman. You don't have Jonathan Taylor. Your offense is not going to be at full steam. Plus, we've seen from backup quarterbacks before, they have these great runs, and then it comes crashing down. Well, I don't think that Joe Flacco will have that same kind of complete decline like we saw with Andy Dalton last week. I do think you can see him take a step back. This Titans team is good enough to stop the Colts defensively. It's just whether or not Will Levis wants to throw it to the other team, if he wants to make a meme of the week, or he wants to throw some ball. And I think after the bye week, he wants to throw some balls. So I'll take the Titans as the upset.
I think he's capable of doing both. Throw some balls and throw some memes.
Yes. I think that's kind of what you can expect from him. So, yeah, you know what? Yeah, Titans upset. You heard it here first.
I eat lead paint for breakfast. That's his new motto.
Lead paint and mayonnaise. That's all you need. Then we have, this will be a football game that is played on a football field. Got the Houston Texans at Gillette Stadium. Patriots now starting Drake May. Houston Texans are favorited by a touchdown and over-under of 38.5. And I'm wondering, is that for the Texans or is that for the whole, Texans and Patriots? Or I guess maybe it doesn't truly matter. This game for me, my first thoughts are pray for Drake May. Look, we don't want anybody to die on a football field, but this might be the week that we see somebody get murdered. Poor guy, his family out in Charlotte, they're going to have to witness a massacre, unfortunately. That offensive line could not stop teddy bears from attacking him. So, honestly, Texans easily cover. Drake May, God rest his soul.
Yeah, fittingly, Ted is from Boston, and if he was running the Patriots or if he was a consultant, he would still be saying his famous line, "You got a lot of problems, don't you?" And if you're Gerard Mayo, you do have some sick and twisted thing in your head, because why on earth would you choose this week of all weeks, knowing you have a bad offensive line, to start Drake May versus the Houston Texans? How about Miami, who does not have a defense? They don't have a pass rush here. It would have been a much easier game if you start Drake May. Guess what? You probably win that game versus Miami, but now you're going to start him when you really have no run game. Antonio Gibson's your main running back here. You have Hunter Henry as your number one receiver option. You still don't have any wide receivers yet on your team. And now you're expecting a rookie to step in week 6 and go up against Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. in the Houston Texans. I mean, the Texans defense may win this game alone, and with the Texans, their offense really hasn't impressed me yet this season, but I still think you can win by a touchdown. But I just think it's super unfair that you're starting Drake May probably in the worst possible matchup of any team like you possibly could have started him against this season, because the Texans' probably best unit is their pass rush. So I think you're just setting him up to fail in this game. I have no idea what Gerard Mayo was thinking. Just give Jacoby Brissett one more week, sacrifice him to the Texans, and then you can start it with Drake May. I get it, you look that bad versus Miami, but at some point, maybe you should have just put him in at halftime last week. That still would have been better than just, throwing him to the Wolves versus the Houston Texans. That's not a good look. And another reason where, was Gerard Mayo the guy? Was he really the guy? The linebackers coach for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Another guy off of Bill Belichick's tree, where Bill Belichick really hasn't had a successful coach off of his tree yet, for the most part.
The only person I can shout out is Brian Flores, but as a head coach, he definitely had his missteps. So I wouldn't say that he was without any issues there. I agree. I mean, I'm looking at the games here that they face coming up. You don't think going to London against the Jaguars defense, which is a cupcake defense, you don't think that would have been a better game? I know they face the Jets. The Titans, I think, is a formidable defense they can face. Like, I just think this team, here's a stat that I heard earlier today. Jacoby Brissett's pressure rate was at 47% of his snaps, which is the highest since 2006. No quarterback is going to survive nearly 50% of their dropbacks having a Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson coming at you at full speed, especially when you're a rookie and it takes you a little bit longer to process information as you're just reading the field. Like, no. I feel for Drake May. I hate to see murder on television like this. If I wanted to watch murder, I'd watch The Godfather. I don't want to watch this on this game. Texans will have a nice win, but good Lord. Pray for this man. Wrap this man in bubble wrap.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also want to see the Texans offense step up this week because I feel like we've seen them come up in spells here a little bit, but I haven't been super impressed with their offense so far. And you have enough talent where just losing Joe Mixon, and then what are you going to look like now without the number one wide receiver in the league to this point, before Jamar Chase just went absolutely absurd, which was pretty much Nico Collins was the number one target for the Houston Texans. What are you going to look like? Is Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell finally going to step up here? So interested to see what the Texans offense looks like in this game.
Yeah, that'll be a big test for them, but they should carry to a win. Patriots defense, do they have any backbone? We'll see. Texans get the win here. Then we have yet another NFC South matchup. Feels like each week we're seeing a matchup head-to-head, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We have the Bucs taking on the Saints at 1 o'clock. Bucs are favored at 3.5 with the over-under of 41.5. What did we miss? Well, let's see. Last week, the Bucs had one of the greatest games of the season against the Falcons, where Kirk Cousins cemented himself as a Hall of Fame candidate. And then the Saints, they didn't really show up against the Chiefs very much. They are at home at the Caesars Dome. What are your thoughts on this game? Does that spread sound about right? Do you think the Saints pull it out?
Yeah, Spencer Rattler also making his first start in this game. Dennis Allen announced. So now Derek Carr and his massive contract of guaranteed money is on the bench right now. And Bill Belichick talked about how the Saints kind of just push up their cap every year, where next year they're going to be below $88 million. And now Derek Carr is officially on the bench for them. So I think when you're a rookie stepping into a situation where the Bucs have, an entire mini bye to prepare, they're pissed off that they lost to the Atlanta Falcons, and they've responded very well this season off of a loss. So I think you're going to get a feisty Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. This is not really a team, again, speaking of the New England Patriots starting Drake May this week, this isn't really a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, even without Levante David, that you want to be throwing your young quarterback to the wolves with yet. And really, the Saints offense was really good the first 2 weeks, but at some point it has to come down to coaching, right? For why it's looked so inept, where they're running a lot of play action the first few weeks, and then they started just kind of running deep balls. So I don't really think this is a great first start for Spencer Rattler. So I'll take the Bucs, especially with how they've been able to respond off of a loss so far this season. And it's just another game where if you lose this game to the Saints, you're falling a little bit too far behind for comfort if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're not panicking per se, but it's still one where you're like, okay, we definitely have our work cut out for us and can't take another loss for at least another 3-4 weeks here.
I like this game here for the Bucs. What gave me hope about this game for them is they got killed by the Broncos in week 3, and then they came back. And I know it's the Eagles. The Eagles haven't looked great, but they did kick the Eagles' ass and dominated them. So I do think that they can do the same thing here against the Saints. Saints offense has just been super clunky. If you get rid of those 2 weeks, their offense has been pretty middle of the pack, if not below average. So you get that, and you also get a rookie quarterback who's filling in for an injured Derek Carr. This is a recipe for the Bucs to come back with the vengeance. I really like that 3.5. In fact, I think it might be the lock of the week for me. I'll take the Bucs to bounce back, beat the Saints, and start to even the score when it comes to them and the Falcons, who I think will be between these two when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it should be between those two. Do you think there is something to Spencer Rattler starting where maybe he has looked better than Derek Carr? Or do you think this is just desperation for the Saints at this point where we have pretty much weeks where we scored 12 points? We got locked down in back to back weeks, and then we only scored 13 points versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Do you think this is just a little bit of desperation to move off of Derek Carr?
Well, Derek Carr, he got banged up last game, so I think like the injury wise, like they get to see what they get from Radler, and then they also get to rest Derek Carr if they want to move forward with him. So I think it's good to see it. You get a little bit of both. Bucks defense is good, but it's not a defense that you're like absolutely we can't have our rookie face them. So I think it makes sense for me. Divisional game though, I mean this is going to be tough. Um, we'll see what Spencer Rattler has. I know he had a lot of promise coming out of college, and he fell in the draft a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see. We haven't really seen too much of him or heard much about him since he got drafted, but we'll see what he has. This will be coming in with blind expectations.
Yeah, I'm excited though. See a new quarterback. It'll be fun.
Yeah, and I think he was a fourth round quarterback, which, fourth round quarterbacks historically, there's always at least one in each draft who does well.
Dak.
Dak, Russ. Um, I don't know if he would count necessarily because he's not great. We'll talk about him later. But Aiden O'Connell in that draft, he was better than a lot of the quarterbacks that were taken earlier. So
Yeah.
see what
Shout out
we
to
see.
Purdue.
Yeah. Then we go to the Eagles, the cheesesteaks. They took a week off last week, beat the bye by the skin of their teeth. They are favored at 9.5 against the lowly Cleveland Browns, who have a monstrous $172 million dead cap hit potentially with Deshaun Watson looming in their thoughts. Cleveland Browns, by no means a world beater. They have been perennial worst top 5 teams according to the Brickyard, and we know that that carries weight. They take on the Eagles, coming off a bye. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni. What do you feel about this spread here?
I hate this game, honestly. I want both of these teams to just crash out and burn. I feel like both of these teams deserve to lose with how pathetic they've been over the past few weeks, and it's been just disappointment after disappointment with the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I would love to pick the Eagles to lose this game, but one thing I can't do from now on is pick the Cleveland Browns to win a game. So I will begrudgingly pick the Diddy led, the Grapist led, the even if they don't want it, we'll go out there and make them do it. Cleveland Browns team to fall to the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think by any means this will be a pretty game, though. I don't think Philadelphia will go out and just dominate like they did to Washington. I think this will look a little bit more like that New York Giants versus Philadelphia game, but I feel like this game, if the Browns really start to struggle on offense again, hopefully we get a Jameis Winston sighting because I don't know, especially against the Philadelphia Eagles team that hasn't really been able to lock anyone down this season, has struggled throughout the year. If Deshaun Watson simply looks terrible and lost again, like, okay, how much more time can this guy really get? And we saw the Broncos move off of Russell Wilson, and you can't really bench Deshaun Watson. Like, you have to do what's best for your team at this point. So if I'm Stefanski, I have to be like, okay, I'm going to start Jameis because it's better for our team, even though he's not good. He's still better than a lifeless, you know, corpse walking out there on the football field. Deshaun Watson has not looked good, but at least he'll give us a energy injection, even if he's turning it over to the other team. So I just don't know how long Cleveland can keep doing this week in and week out with Deshaun if he looks really bad again versus the Eagles.
I mean, he's quite literally statistically the worst quarterback starting in the NFL at this point. And if we're going to see Jacoby Brissett get benched, which I think was inevitable, if we're going to see, Spencer Rattler step in, for the Browns, they fall to 1-5, and if they have another pathetic offensive performance, which is directly his fault, no, I think we got to see Jameis Winston at some point. Jameis Winston, say what you will about him, he is a talented guy. He may not be a long-term starter, but I think that he would inject some life there. You're slipping quick in your division. You have the Bengals, who if they can stop anybody, we'll start to get together. The Steelers have played pretty well, and then you have the Ravens. Like, not only that, playoff-wise, you guys are just out of it at this point. And Nick Chubb comes back hopefully within the next 2 weeks. Like, you still have somewhat of a life to at least show some dignity to your fans. Like, do what's best for you. I think Jameis Winston should show out in this game. Hopefully he comes in like the second half, or they just after this game they say they're moving forward with Jameis.
Yeah, if I was them, I would just cut Deshaun Watson. Like, sorry, we'll take the dead cap because what's worse, paying a guy $200 million? Like, honestly, at that point, if I'm the Browns, I feel like his contract is worth it to pay him not to play on my team. Like, I would, if I was the owner and they're like, all right, you either have $50 million in dead cap or Deshaun Watson starts for you. I mean, I feel like I would take the $50 million in dead cap and pay $50 million just for this guy not to play in my team. Yes, like that doesn't really seem like that crazy of a notion for the worst quarterback in NFL history.
Yeah, honestly, one thing that Nick Wright proposed that I actually don't think is a terrible idea is if there's any suitors, a team like the Panthers, who has a bunch of cap that they're not using, trying to see if you can trade some of your picks and Deshaun Watson so that they can eat some of the contract. Like, if they can do that, and then inevitably that other team cuts him and he just goes into NFL obscurity, like, that's an idea where I'm like, okay, maybe then that could be totally fine because $80 million isn't as bad as $180 million. We'll see if they can
Yeah.
make a deal like that. I don't know anybody in their right mind who would do that, but still an interesting concept to float around.
I think that's kind of a delusional proposition from him because if I was Roger Goodell, I would void any trade for Deshaun Watson. Just tell the Browns they have to live with that decision because this was a guy that was on the commissioner's exempt list for illicit activities outside of football. Like, this wasn't a guy that the NFL wanted to encourage people to trade for or sign on their team. And if the Panthers are that dumb that they just want to pay nothing just to help the Browns get rid of Deshaun Watson, honestly, the Panthers deserve to be dissolved as an organization if anyone is that dumb. Like, it's like, okay, that's like a take that works on paper if you're a nerdy numbers guy like Nick Wright, but it's also semi delusional from him, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. Wasn't the Panthers in on Deshaun Watson when they were making that trade? I gotta look again. It was either them or the
Um,
Falcons.
it was the Falcons and the Saints.
The Falcons and Saints. Okay, so just think that there's a situation there's an alternate universe where he's on the Saints, making the salary cap for the Saints that much worse, or there's a situation where he's on the Falcons and he just makes their situation that much worse. There's no Kirk Cousins in the Falcons. Like, oh my God. I picture the Saints one specifically. You picture him on the Saints with that god awful contract. Woof, dude. That's tough. He's just given up on his team, and you just can't keep having him play at this point.
Yeah, I would definitely be in favor of paying him not to play, though.
Yes, I agree. Take the hit, move on. Broncos are doing okay. They should be fine. All right. So then we go to a game that actually, we talked about one of the worst games of the week. How about we talk about one of the best? We get to see Jaden Daniels go to Baltimore and take on the Ravens. Ravens are favored at 6.5. 1 o'clock slate, over under of 51.5. Commanders, high flying offense. Ravens, high flying offense. Great defense. This should be just similar to that Ravens and Bengals game we saw last week. Just a high scoring, fun game.
Yeah, no, this is going to be one of the most electric games of the week coming into it. And the Commanders have played very well over the past few weeks, but I feel like this is a game that Lamar Jackson is going to shine in, where Lamar in the regular season over the past few years has really risen to the occasion. He rose to the occasion versus the Dallas Cowboys, and the Baltimore Ravens just shut them out right away. Dak Prescott did his usual garbage time stat padding nonsense so his fans could say, look at the stats. I mean, can you believe how good he is? And then versus Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson rose to the occasion. Versus Joe Burrow, down 10 points on the road in Cincinnati. He rose there. So I think he's going to try and, go for maybe 3 MVPs here and really solidify himself as the best player in football if he can get to the Super Bowl. Obviously, he won't be as good as Patrick Mahomes, but if he can win a third MVP, Chiefs have some injuries. A few things go the Ravens' way this year. I think this is a game that Lamar Jackson is going to challenge himself. I know everyone is talking about Jaden Daniels right now. I know he had one of the best months as a rookie here, but don't forget about who I am. And then we also have Derek Henry on this team. It seems like this offense is really clicking and getting into a scary point um, in the season right now. So I do think the Ravens are kind of going to be like, okay, this is time where we show we're the grown up. We've been here before. The Commanders, you're here. That's nice. But you still have some learning to do, and it seems like this is a good game where the Commanders maybe come back down to earth a little bit in this game.
I agree. I'm looking at their games that they face because obviously you face who's in front of you, but let's just remind the viewers who they face, right? They faced the Bucs in week 1, and the Bucs took care of business. They beat them, held them to 20 points. The Giants, also a solid defense, give them some credit. They were held to 21 points. And then they faced the Bengals defense, which is one of the worst in the NFL. They cooked. The Cardinals, terrible defense. They cooked. And then against the Browns defense, which was respectable last year, but they took care of business this time around. So they haven't faced really a great defense, I think, or really like a really good defense, or at least not to the level of the Ravens, maybe all season, honestly. Last good defense I'd say would be the Giants or the Bucs. This is really their first big challenge. Ravens, you can say, is a top 5 unit in the NFL. I think this is where you start to see him have he takes a step back. I don't think he's going to play terribly, but I think that he starts to come down to earth a little bit. And the Ravens just take care of business. I think they cover, and I think they beat the Commanders soundly.
Yeah, I think they beat them as well. And then the Derrick Henry, I feel like, will be the difference maker in this game. And then Jaden Daniels has been playing clean football, but I could see this being the game where you start to see some turnovers and some of those mistakes where teams are finally starting to get some tape on what him and Cliff Kingsbury are doing with this offense. So I think the Ravens will start to be able to take advantage of that and see what has worked, especially with John Harbaugh. He's not the best coach in the league, but he's, one of those guys who at least is better than 75 to 77% of the coaches in the league.
I agree, yeah. I think the 6.5, I would take the Ravens to cover that spread. I think they should be able to win by more than a touchdown. Then we go to the 4 o'clock slate, and this was one of the games that we talked about a little bit earlier, but we have Chargers and Broncos in Denver. Denver is on a 3-game winning streak. Chargers barely squeaked out a win against the bye week last week. Chargers are favored at -3. Broncos and Chargers historically. I'll pull up the record for Justin Herbert, how he's been against the Broncos, but historically has not played super well there. Thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I don't believe that Justin Herbert has won in Denver. And Denver has been his house of horrors. Pat Surtain has kind of been a nightmare for the Chargers, and I think this will be a lower scoring game. But with Denver, I don't necessarily think this is going to be a game where they win just because the Chargers historically struggle in Denver. I think this will be a game where I think their defense is playing at a high level right now, and I think that moment that they had on the sideline with Bo Nix really means something for this football team, where this is officially Sean Payton's team. We talk about how coaches get to a situation and maybe they get there and they didn't choose the quarterback, but he officially has all of the pieces that he wants there in Denver, is going to keep continuing to build upon that. And I think that the Saints run that Sean Payton had was better than the run that Jim Harbaugh had in San Francisco, where he actually won a Super Bowl there, had long-term success, and I think he's had better success overall as an NFL head coach. And I think right now they're currently a better team than the Los Angeles Chargers. So I do think that they win this game in Denver, but I think this will be like a 21-17 type of game, maybe even like 17-13. I think this is going to be a grind out battle versus them. And I know the Chargers run game looked really good with J.K. Dobbins. I just want to see how sustainable that run game is going to be as we get closer into it. I'm rooting for Ladd McConkey in this game, but I just think Denver's always been a tough place for Justin Herbert to play.
Yeah, I'm looking at his record. He is 3-4 against the Broncos historically. The last two times he faced the Broncos, he did go down with injury. Um, they lost both games last year against them, which ultimately ended up in a Chase Daniels and Easton Stick sighting. So, hopefully,
Oh,
Justin Herbert stays at full health. I would hate to see him go down again against the Broncos. Now,
has he won in Denver?
in Denver, yes, he did win in Denver. I'm looking at the schedule here. Um, he beat them. Oh no, he's never beat them at Denver. He's never beat them at Denver, but he has won. He's 3-1 in SoFi against them, so that is a real
Okay.
thing. He hasn't played necessarily bad against them on the road. He's had some good games. He's had some bad games, but still something there. Now for the Chargers, the last 2 weeks they faced two really great defenses. They faced the Chargers and the Steelers. I'm sorry, Chiefs and the Steelers, and they put up 10 points against both of them. Herbert's a little banged up. I like what I've seen from Lad McConkey, but the rest of the receiver core, I'm a little underwhelmed with. I think the Broncos' defense is good enough to stop the J.K. Dobbins of the world. This will be an ugly game. In this game, I think the only advantage the Chargers really have is the better quarterback, and I also think Jim Harbaugh with a week bye, does that give him the edge? I think either way, this is a game. It's hard for me to pick one or the other. I think that spread, the 3, is a trap. I wouldn't pick that. I wouldn't touch this game if I'm a gambling man, because I think it's going to come down to like 17-14, like you said. Like it'll come down to a Dicker the kicker or Will Lutz field goal to win the game. And if I'm picking with just simply how the Chargers are historically, I'm going to deal with a game-winning Will Lutz field goal to win it in regulation. That's probably what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah, I could see that happening for sure. And do you think this game will kind of solidify that second best team in the West, or do you still think we have a little bit to go here? Because I think the Broncos are showing signs of surprising teams and potentially slipping into that seventh spot in the AFC this year. Because the Colts, they've had their issues this season. Really doesn't look like anyone from the South or East is going to make it. And then the Steelers are showing like some signs of weakness. Same with the Bengals and the Browns. So could you realistically see the Broncos getting into that seventh spot?
No, the reason why I don't see them slipping into that 7th spot is right now it's really great what they're doing. They're on a nice 3-game winning streak. But at the end of the day, their offense is pretty predictable, I feel like. And I feel like at some point, teams will come around and start to figure them out. Because right now, it's like their defense is getting all these different stops, and they've played very well. Um, but it's really like I need to see more from Bo Nix for me to really see that. Because right now, it just seems like their offense is very simple, very conservative, which is, that's kind of how Sean Payton's operated in the past. But I'd like to think that down the stretch, when they go to face these Ravens and Chiefs and the Chargers again, like they should be able to, um, people should be able to adjust to their game plan. And I'll give credit to Jim Harbaugh's defense so far. They've been one of the best defenses on paper this year. They've been able to contain a lot of teams. So I think eventually people will come around to the Broncos and start to have a appropriate game plan for them.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing would be like they could have made the playoffs last year if it wasn't for the weird Russell Wilson saga at the end of the year where they benching him basically strictly for the cap.
That's a good point. Yeah, they do have a great defense. Pat Surtain,
And
maybe the best corner in the league potentially.
yeah, and it's been a Super Bowl defense almost for the past 2, 3 years now. And it seems like last week the offense finally gave them some hope by
Yeah,
dropping 30.
yeah, they have a clear. I compare them to the Patriots last live stream, and I think I'm talking about the Patriots first year with Mac Jones. Like their defense is really, really good, and then as long as he's conservative and he doesn't throw any interceptions, then this Broncos team should be able to win some games. I'll pick them to win this week. We'll see if people start to come around with their offensive game plan.
All right. Maybe I'll just be the hex for the Broncos, similar to what you are with the Steelers. We'll see.
That's a great game to pivot to. Very next game, Steelers and Raiders. People have said that I am the curse of the Steelers because ever since I hopped on the wagon, they are now 0-2. and I laugh maniacally when someone says that. That's hilarious. Steelers are favored at 3 in Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, I'm going to stay on the wagon for one more week because
Get
it's
off.
funny. It's a funny team to rock. Steelers didn't look all that great last week against the Cowboys, albeit they were playing at 1 a.m., so maybe that is what caused it, but played pretty well against the Colts in that loss there. And this is really like moving forward. They face the Jets, Giants, and Commanders, so they have a really great opportunity for them to really get a stranglehold on the this division and competing with the Ravens. So I feel good about this game here, bouncing back, getting the win. Mike Tomlin off of a loss. I think they get the win here. They beat the Raiders. Raiders are also starting Aiden O'Connell, which that defense should be able to eat alive.
Yeah, the defense should definitely be able to eat alive there, and especially for the Steelers, this will be a game where you're in Vegas. And what does that mean for the Pittsburgh Steelers? This will be essentially a home game for them. And this is a Raiders team starting Aiden O'Connell that I don't think their offense is suddenly going to be rejuvenated by Aiden O'Connell in the starting lineup. And your defense hasn't looked that good. And the Steelers offense, maybe you score 20 points again, and it looks similar to what you did versus the Chargers. But I think this is a game your defense will win on its own. And then you referenced also that this is a game where if the Steelers can win, they'll start to string some wins together because they face the Jets and the Commanders. But I don't think that's necessarily two easy games for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, because I think the Jets defensively could pose problems for the Steelers, and the Commanders could also pose problems. So I actually think that this is a must-win game for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because if they don't win this game, if they don't go to 4-2, like, those are two games that you could definitely drop. And with the Steelers, there are no guaranteed wins here. So I think this is a game that they know they need a win, and they know they need to at least split one of the two. And I don't really see them beating the Commanders. I think that'll definitely be a dogfight here. But I think with it being a home game, with the Raiders not having a running game, so you don't have a run game on that team. And this isn't the same thing where we said, you know, the Cowboys don't have a run game with Rico Doidle. Like, this is different. This is still the Las Vegas Raiders with Alexander Madsen, one of the worst running games in football here. So what does that mean? TJ Watt teeing off on your quarterback with Patrick Queen here. So I do think that this is a game where the Steelers defense will be able to dominate, especially in a home environment in Vegas.
Yeah. When I was talking about the wins here, I saw Jets and Giants as two teams that they could potentially
Jets and
see.
Giants.
Yeah,
Okay.
Commanders should be a tough game. Ravens, which comes up after that, should be tough. But I think if they can win this game, they can rattle off Jets and Giants and play competitive here. Raiders, this is a game like the Steelers have no reason to lose this game. They are the better team defensively. Offensively, you get what you can out of Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, but I think they're still a better running game than the Raiders, and especially with Justin Fields.
Yeah, Giants
Now,
will be tough, though.
yeah, we'll see. Now we go to a game that has been circled on the hearts of the Detroit Lions fans for the last several months. After what happened with the offsides call and everything, that's right, we have the Lions out for revenge in Jerry World. Lions are favored at 3. I think it's as low as $37 for those close to Texas, Arlington that being.
Oh.
This is a 4 o'clock slate, $37 to see Jared Goff and the Lions get revenge against the most bullshit call of all of last season. I don't want to hear anything about the Ravens and Chiefs game. I don't want to hear anything about the Super Bowl. No. Dan Skipper not reporting as eligible. When you see him go to the refs and say, hey, I'm an eligible receiver, and they say, no, I didn't see anything. Cowboys move to 12-5. They win their division. Lions should have been the 1 seed. I'm not over it, but we're getting through it anyways. They just got their revenge against the Seahawks before the bye. They got their revenge against the Rams. Not necessarily. They beat them last year, but, you know, continuing on with the Matt Stafford lore. This is another game, getting revenge against a team that wronged them. I know where I'm going with this game. I feel like you're on the same wavelength as me.
Oh, Absolutely, I'm on the same wavelength as you, man. On the same wavelength as you, as two pike cold brews with double espresso in them. I mean, how can you not be fired up for this game if you're the Detroit Lions? Because one thing Dan Campbell and the Lions have done every single year is gotten better, and they've broken some sort of curse with the Detroit Lions and gotten some sort of revenge, whether it was beating Seattle this year, whether it was having the greatest season in NFL history and finishing 13-4 year, and I know the record said 12-5, but they did beat the, Dallas Cowboys last year, and I actually think that the Detroit Lions offense is better this year than it was last year. It seems like they're more in a rhythm, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs getting a year better. And this is why I had a huge problem where people were writing the Detroit Lions off this season. They're saying this team is going to fall off. They're calling Dan Campbell a bad coach coming into this season, where you have two number one running backs here. You still have the best offensive line in football. Jared Goff is coming off a game where he went 18 for 18 and had one of the most historic games in, I don't know, caught a touchdown pass. And you don't think they are infuriated by the way the game ended last season? You don't think they're going to come out here and absolutely destroy the Dallas Cowboys and beat them down up and down the field this week? Sorry, Steph. Sorry, Dak Prescott. You can't make the same stupid, idiotic, some of the dumbest throws I've ever seen you make on Sunday Night Football versus the Detroit Lions team, because one thing they can do is score versus you. So I think the Lions are out for blood here. I think it's about grit, and the Lions are a team that focuses on revenge. They focus on ways to get motivated for games. They focus on ways to get up and absolutely get after it here, and this is a perfect game to prepare, because I believe they play the Minnesota Vikings next week. So if you can come into it feeling great off of a win this time, I think this is going to be a game where Jared Goff absolutely dices up the Dallas Cowboys secondary that could really use Stephon Gilmore right now, who's in Minnesota, and especially with Micah Parsons struggling with a sprained ankle right now. If you can't rush Jared Goff this time, like this season, he's absolutely going to dice you up. He just went 18 for 18. And then you also have the play action this season with, all right, who wants to get a touchdown? Is it David Montgomery? Do you want to rush for it? Is it Jahmyr Gibbs? Do you want to rush for it? Jamison Williams? Do you want to rip off a 70-yard touchdown? Amon-Ra St. Brown, still the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL. Sam Laporta coming for the mantle of best tight end in the league. I mean, what is not to like here? How can you not be fired up for the Lions in this game? It's absolutely ridiculous. People wrote this team off.
Oh, yeah. First of all, adversity with that bullshit call. Dan Skipper reporting offsides. I went to a Lions game this year already. When any time an offensive lineman reports as eligible, their fans go fucking crazy. I'm not kidding. That was one of the best parts about that game when I saw them and the Cardinals. Not only that, what did we last see from the Lions? Oh, I don't know. 18 for 18 for Jared Goff. You like that? Jamison Williams, a guy who has missed some time with injuries and suspensions, now looking like a really elite number 2 for them. I like that. And then defensively, they look a lot better defensively this year than they did last year, which is another reason why I like them. And how about we talk about the Dallas Cowboys for a minute, who, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, the Lions are not a team that you can fall asleep at the wheel for 3 quarters and then come back in the 4th quarter. Like, that's not how the Lions operate. They're going to continue to push their will. They're going to go up 28, 35, 42. They're going to keep on pushing on. So this is a lock for this game. Lions at -3. I like the Lions at -7. I like the Lions to cover, bleed out the Cowboys. They got revenge, and they're ready for it. So give me the Lions to cover. They take care of business. They beat up on the Cowboys.
Yeah, give me -21 in this game. I mean, I think this is going to be an absolute shellacking. How can you not be pissed off if you're the Detroit Lions? If I'm them, I have an offensive lineman report on every single play just to make sure the refs are awake, and the refs know this time, and kind of the refs know, like, in basketball, like if you played sports, like there are actual things called makeup calls, especially in the NFL, in the NBA. If you played sports before, you probably had a frustrating moment where it wasn't an actual penalty, but you got away with one, so the refs give you a makeup call. Like, I think the Lions will get some makeup calls in this game, and I think the NFL will try and also be on the Lions side with this one here, especially with that terrible product that the Cowboys just put out on Sunday Night Football. And then also Aiden Hutchinson coming for Defensive Player of the Year, and I think really the difference in this defense is just not necessarily, he's not the best player in the world, but having Carlton Davis on your team, I really liked how he got some penalties. The Lions secondary was struggling a little bit, and then Carlton Davis got in the referee's face, and they were like having a heated exchange. So he showed leadership. He was someone who would step up, ask the refs for what was going on in this game, and I feel like he's their benefit that they've had in the secondary, which is really where they've struggled, and that's what's going to take them to the next level in this one. So no, Rico Doidle is not going to be enough to get it done in this game.
Especially when the Lions are the #1 rushing defense. Also, I think one last thing. I think Terrion Arnold, he's been a good pickup for them in the draft, but he has been a guy that's been heavily penalized. So I think an extra week of just taking back, looking at film, is going to help him be a little bit more disciplined when it comes time to face the Cowboys. Because obviously the Cowboys typically, outside of the Chiefs, probably get the most whistles their way. So I still like the Lions to take care of business here.
Also, when do the Lions not hit on draft picks? Like, that's also this thing about this Lions team when people are saying, oh, they're probably going to fall off. I'm like, you're forgetting that the Lions really haven't missed a draft pick ever in this Dan Campbell era.
No, and Terrion Arnold, he's been good for them so far. And I know there's some other players that are starting to come along here as well. So the Lions, they've been absolutely, the reason why they're as good as they are is because of their draft. So, yeah, we like what we've seen.
Like that?
I love that. Now, speaking of you like that, we have Kirk Cousins coming off of a Hall of Fame level game. They're going to put that ball in the Hall of Fame someday. They take on the Carolina Kitty Cats. Andy Dalton, the fall from grace after being the star for them the last 2 weeks prior. The Falcons are favorited at -6 and over-under of 46.5. Kirk Cousins, that's very nice. They're very bold. They must have watched the show. They must know that we were a fan of last week's performance. Kirk Cousins, 46. Can he do it again? I don't know. That's bold. Falcons, Kirk Cousins, MVP candidate potentially for him. Went absolutely parabolic against the Bucs. One of the clutchest quarterbacks over the last 3 years. I have drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm almost overdosing on the Kool-Aid at this point. Give me Kirk Cousins. Will he throw for 500 yards a game? We don't know. But if there's any team that he can go back-to-back 500-yard games against with, it's against this Carolina Kitty Cats defense, who does not have Brian Burns, who does not have Frankie Louvu, doesn't have really anybody on this team to stop them. Give me the Falcons in this game. They cover the spread. Maybe not 500, but I'll take at least a 400-yard game. Something modest.
Something modest. Yeah, I think that spread is mostly just relying on the Falcons to get 35 in this game. And for the Falcons, there is something that they need to prove in this game. And my one nitpick for them this season would be what? Every single game that they played has been within one possession. So can we get just a nice, easy win where you go out there and dominate? Or does every single game have to be one possession like it was that year in Minnesota? So I think this will be that real test for the Atlanta Falcons, albeit against the Panthers, but you need to go out there and, not have a close one possession game. But I know you're in love with Kirk Cousins right now. You are in love with the emo Kirk, and I can't blame you right now because number 18, Kirk Cousins, has been electric. He updated his software. He did a reboot after that Achilles injury, and I don't know if he got a new improved Achilles or what's going on here, but Kirk Cousins this season has been the best Kirk we have ever seen. Darnell Mooney has been electric. Drake London popping off the charts in year 2. So hopefully the Falcons get the run game going, but yeah, their defense should overwhelm the Panthers. They just had a tough game versus the Chicago Bears, and I just don't see Andy Dalton leading the Panthers. But I will say the Falcons, I'll give you a challenge, and can you blow out the Panthers this week? Because I don't want to see another one-possession game, and if this is another game where they're kind of playing with their food again, I'm going to be a little bit concerned. And I know you just had a huge win versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but every single game can't be a one-possession game.
Yeah, that's fair. I hope they have. This is the team for them to beat up on, so let's hope that they do. Speaking of a team that they should beat up on, Sunday Night Football, we have the Bengals. Dare I say the 1-4 Cincinnati Bengals, taking on the New York Giants. And let's see, for the Giants, they had a good game. Nothing really I can nitpick for them. Facing the Seahawks, they had a great win last week. And then one of the games of the year so far with the Ravens and Bengals game, Bengals ended up falling to the Ravens. But Bengals are facing the Giants without Malik Neighbors, with Kayvon Thibodeau banged up, with Devin Singletary banged up. Now they're relying on Tyron Tracy and Darius Slayton. Their defense has looked terrible so far, but they are 1-4. They do have the best offense in the league, arguably, with Jamar Chase, Zach Moss, and everybody else. Bengals, they're favored at 3.5. If you don't want to be on the worst top 5 list, beat the Giants and beat them well, please. 1-5 is unexcusable, and at this point, if they lose this game, I'm going to be going for Zach Taylor's job. I'm not kidding. If he loses this game and they are 1-5 for this team and this roster, we got to start talking about his job. This is a game they have to win.
This is pitiful that it's Sunday Night Football, though. Who thought this was a good idea? I would honestly rather watch Colts and Titans on Sunday Night Football than this game.
How about Cowboys and Detroit?
Yeah.
How about Baltimore and Washington? Good Lord.
Can we flex? Can we flex the Bengals? I know it's crazy to say, but can we flex the Bengals out of Sunday Night Football? Like, Broncos, Chargers, like, that'd be a better game.
Yeah. Hell, even Packers and Cardinals would be a better game.
Yeah, literally. But this is the game, though, for the Cincinnati Bengals that if you lose, I think the odds of them missing the playoffs wildly go through the roof. This is a must-win game, and I believe everyone on the team knows the assignment, and we've seen 1-5 teams make the playoffs before, and I still believe in the Bengals. I still think they can make the playoffs, but at least show some life on the defensive side of the football. But you went out there, had an electric game versus the Ravens, and then you fell short, blew a 10-point lead, and then the week before, you couldn't make Jaden Daniels in the #1 offense in the NFL this season, averaging over 31 points a game. Jaden Daniels having the best September month of any rookie in NFL history here. You weren't able to beat them, so there's really no shame in losing to either of those two teams. But if you lose to Daniel Jones, you're going to have a huge problem with that. So you have extra time to prepare because it's Sunday night. You can kind of get motivated, see where the rest of the teams are. If the Ravens lose to the Commanders, you're right back in it. But this is a game where you have to win. And if you lose this game, there's going to be some huge problems in Cincinnati. But I will take the Bengals to win this game because I think this is the time where they really have to start turning it up. And I think even if their defense is struggling, you still are going up against the Giants. So this is a game where even if you have a horrific defense, I think Joe Burrow and the offense is enough to win this game.
I agree. This also comes down to, like, it's not just losing to Daniel Jones. It's losing to Daniel Jones without his #1 running back, without Malik Neighbors, and without Kayvon Thibodeau on the other side. Like, come on, guys. This is a game you got to win. No doubt about it.
I think Malik Neighbors might be playing this week.
Is he? He coming back? Okay.
He's questionable.
He's questionable. Maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. If he does,
doesn't matter though.
Still doesn't matter. If he's with, and if he's not there, then inexcusable. I think that's when Zach Taylor's job's on the line. So we're in cahoots here. Bengals got to beat the Giants. It's a must.
You have to, or the sky's falling.
Exactly. Now we go to Monday Night Football here. We have Buffalo taking on New York. New York, freshly new coach. Mr. Clean is out. Robert Saleh, he is now unemployed. He's got the cardboard box outside of your local Macy's. And the Buffalo Bills. The last 2 weeks, they've gotten annihilated by two contending teams. They now face the Jets, who we'll see how they respond without Robert Saleh. Right now, Vegas is saying 2.5 favorites for Buffalo. Over under 40.5. Early thoughts on this game, Monday Night Football. We've seen the Jets and them typically split. How do you feel about this Monday night game?
2.5 is a crazy spread, if I'm being honest.
That
is absolutely wild that Vegas has gone from Josh Allen is the best player in the league, and I love him and the Buffalo Bills too. We're now concerned about Sean McDermott's job, where everyone now, NFL insiders, have Sean McDermott's job basically as next in line, and I've been saying that Sean McDermott is not the guy. He is not a Super Bowl winning head coach. He can build a franchise, but he hasn't been able to make the in-game adjustments, and I actually like how the New York Jets defense matches up versus this Buffalo Bills team, especially if you're able to match Sauce Gardner up versus Keon Coleman. I mean, we went over how we didn't think you went up against the Vikings. We didn't think that was really a fair team to fire Robert Saleh versus, just because the Vikings have been the best team in football this year, potentially had the best defense, but Aaron Rodgers coming off a bad game and then Robert Saleh being fired. Typically you have that first week boost where the head coach gets removed and then the team really kind of rallies after they lose their head coach. And I think this could be a situation like that. Aaron Rodgers steps up in this game. So I will take the Jets to win a very ugly Monday Night Football game, especially with what I saw last time versus the Jets on Monday Night Football, where Josh Allen had 4 turnovers, and he hasn't been turning it over like crazy yet. And I think he's due for one of those horrific Josh Allen games, which is crazy saying that he just had he just went 9 for 30, but just the way that they finished that game versus the Texans really worries me. Like, all you needed to do was get the game to overtime, but Josh Allen almost threw 2 interceptions versus the Houston Texans, and then he only put up 10 points versus the Dallas Cowboys. Like, you're going to still tell me that the Dallas Cowboys defense is better than the Jets? I don't think so. So now we're going from Josh Allen is the best player in football, the media pushing this Josh Allen propaganda on all of us, and then he finally falls all the way back down to earth versus the Jets, who just fired their coach, look embarrassed. But I think this is the turning point where the Jets are now competing for the division, and if they win this game, you're like, the Jets, I think, oh, we actually have a chance. And the Buffalo Bills did go 5-6 last year, where they kind of started out a little bit clunky and then turned it on the end of the season. I just think this isn't the same wagon of a team that the Bills have had. You don't have Stephon Diggs there anymore. It's not the same dynamic roster. So give me the Jets on Monday Night Football. And I think that 2.5-point spread is very telling by Vegas, that they're not just handing the Buffalo Bills this game. It's very surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I think it sounds like Buffalo's come down to earth a little bit. In this game, it's hard for me to pick the Jets in this game, simply because, like, it just feels like that building is on fire. You fire Robert Saleh for questionable reasons, it seems like. It seems like half of the locker room fucking hate each other also. I'm taking Buffalo in this game. They just had 2 embarrassing losses to 2 teams that are superior to them. The Jets are at a team that this will be competitive. I think 2.5 is a fair spread for them. I think Buffalo, it's hard to say who's the better team because Aaron Rodgers hasn't looked himself. I'll take Buffalo in this game. Josh Allen, he's a guy that on primetime does ball out historically. So following the 2 embarrassing losses, following the Jets in disarray, first game without the head coach, I like Buffalo in this game. I think James Cook also this year has been playing pretty well for them. They did face 2 good running teams, or 2 running defenses, that is. The Jets will give them trouble. I think they'll have a tough running game as well, but I think Buffalo should bounce back in this game following 2 tough teams that they faced in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen really balling out on prime time on Monday Night Football last year, balling out on Sunday Night Football versus the Denver Broncos last season, and Russell Wilson balling out versus the Ravens, putting up 10 points. So, yeah, he really has been balling out on prime time over the last few years.
He's kind of one of those players that he'll either ball the fuck out and he'll be Superman, or he'll be Superman without a kryptonite. That's kind of what Josh Allen's been. I'd like to think that after these last 2 games that he has some sort of motivation to bounce back and be competitive. Jets were on the worst top 5 list. It's hard for me to pick them after the complete disarray this team feels like they're in following that game.
If they lose this game, could you see them on the worst top 5 list?
The Bills?
Yeah.
Maybe. Let's see where the documents bring us. There's always,
I feel like
every team is always eligible for the worst top 5 just based on how they are. Obviously, we're not going to see the Chiefs there or anything, but I think if you're 0-3 and you get embarrassed by the Jets too, I don't know. Jets were on the worst top 5 list. Like, if you lose to the worst top 5 list, you are eligible to be on the worst top 5. So just know that your team is never safe from the worst
Yeah,
top
it
five.
feels like Josh Allen is either Superman or the Deep.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good comparison. He's either fucking octopus or he's fucking Lois Lane.
Have a fresca.
Have a fresca. But those are all the games. And then bye weeks, the Chiefs. I think they win the bye week. The refs probably bail them out, but they do win against the bye week.
Yeah, it's a close game, but I think they still handle business. You know.
Yep. The Rams, it's not looking good. Banged up. I think even the bye week kind of has some hands against them, but
Yeah, I
maybe
could
they
see
pull it out.
Stafford getting injured against the bye week this year, kind of fall apart a little bit. Sean McVay did his best versus the bye week, but it was just another tough loss. That Campbell's soup was just not enough.
Dolphins, they can't beat it. I think even the bye week has a lead majority of this game. I think the bye week against the Dolphins, they can beat the Patriots, but that's it.
You know, the Dolphins still don't have a plan versus the bye week this week. I mean, you still don't have a plan at quarterback. It seems like we haven't heard much from Tua, and it's kind of been radio silent around Tua, and they still haven't had a plan at quarterback. Haven't talked about trading for anyone, so I'm very confused of what the Miami Dolphins are doing because they're about to be in cap hell in the next few years.
Yeah, they're a complete nightmare. Last team for the bye week, the Vikings. Vikings against the bye week. Does their luck run out against that rest, or does Sam Darnold continue on his historic run?
Yeah, I think Sam Darnold goes and pops some mollies and kisses some random women like he was talking about doing in New York. So I think they win against the bye week this week and stay undefeated.
Let's go. 5-0 against NFL teams, 1-0 against the bye. That's all you can ask for. Hell yeah. So we now reviewed every game going on around the NFL, including the bye weeks. Don't think we missed the bye weeks. We aren't like every show. We talk about the bye weeks too.
And yeah,
I
we
still
pick against the bye week. We haven't actually missed a pick against the bye week in our tenure doing this.
No, we are however many games and so we
Yeah.
can't lose. But there is a couple things that we do need to know before going into this week. I talked about who was the worst teams going into week 5. It's been a negative aura around the Brickyard. This last episode, we talked about negative things. We talked about this team was bad. This team was bad. It's time for us to have our glass half full. It's time for us to talk about one of the highlights of the interwebs, probably the most exciting part of your week, which is the best top 5 teams according to the Brickyard. Documents are out. They are ready to be revealed, talking about who is the top 5 teams in the NFL according to the Brickyard.
Yeah, and we do have the top 5 teams in the NFL according to the Brickyard here. And at number 5 is a team that has looked good so far to start this season. They lost their starting quarterback in week 1, and then somehow they made Malik Willis look like a competent starter. And now they were higher up on this list before, but they haven't been as impressive as I would like them to be. Jordan Love has had some turnovers here, but I still think at number 5 is the Green Bay Packers, especially with you have a budding star here in Jaden Reed, and you went out and handled business versus the Rams. You end up losing to the Vikings, and that's okay. You'll have a chance to make that up. Jordan Love still coming back, but I think as the season ramps up, they are going to be one of the 5 best teams according to the Brickyard, especially because of Matt LaFleur, what he's been able to do over the past few years with this team. And the Packers overall have been a second half team under Matt LaFleur, where they really pick it up in late November into December and carry that momentum into the playoffs. So I see that happening again. Have another good game against the Arizona Cardinals. So I can see them consistently staying on the top 5 teams according to the Brickyard so far this season. So at number 5, we have the Green Bay Packers. At number 4, potentially one of the best defenses in football. They just got a win in London here. They are currently undefeated, and that is going to be the Minnesota Vikings here. I'm a little bit worried seeing Aaron Jones get hurt, and then Sam Darnold has come back down to earth a little bit, where he's had some clunky turnovers, and the offense hasn't looked as dynamic over the past few weeks, but you still will get Hawkinson back. You'll get Addison back into the flow, and then going up against Sauce Gardner for Justin Jefferson was a little bit of a challenge this week, but I still think you are the fourth best team because you hadn't lost this week, and really the strength of your team has been the defense. And while Sam Darnold has come back down to earth, it's not a big deal because all you need him to do is really just not mess it up for you if you're the Minnesota Vikings. So I think he's really been able to excel with Justin Jefferson. You're going up against a tough bye week this week, so we'll see how they do. But I do think that the Vikings will come back and they will stay on the top four, and I have been impressed with what I've seen with them. So at number 4, Minnesota Vikings. At number 3, potentially the most dynamic duo in the NFL right now. People were talking about how Luka and Kyrie were the most dynamic backcourt or the most skilled backcourt of all time until they got gentlemen swept by Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the NBA Finals. People would talk about how Steph Curry and Klay Thompson were the greatest shooting backcourt of all time, and they were, unlike Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. But, damn it, if they're the best skilled shooting backcourts of all time, then the best running combo of all time has to be Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I don't know how Derrick Henry does it, but is it me or does he look faster this season where seems like he's cut a little bit of the weight and he's still terrifying. He's kind of resurrected his career with Baltimore. This is probably the best team that he has ever had. No disrespect to those Titans teams with Mike Vrabel, but Ryan Tannehill is not Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a 2-time MVP. He is someone that looks motivated this season to get back to the Super Bowl. People were doubting the Ravens a little bit this season, but I think offensively they look way more dynamic than they were last year. Thankfully to Derrick Henry, who's opened up that entire offense to them. So you just got one of the most impressive wins, probably the best game of the year in Cincinnati, coming down from being down 10 points with 5 minutes left to go and winning versus the Bengals in overtime. Truly electric stuff, and truly stuff that reminded you in that game why we love the game of football so much and why the NFL is king. When you see the Ravens and Bengals going head to head in overtime, they really gave you that feeling that the NFL season was in full effect in that game. But at number 2, a team that has grit, a team that has been one of the best teams in football and continuously improved year in and year out, and are just coming off their best season in their history as an NFL franchise. That's right, I'm talking about the Detroit Lions. People wanted to write off the Lions this season. People wanted to say that this team was going to fall off. People were blaming Dan Campbell. People were going to think that they were going to crumble under Dan Campbell. But if you've paid attention to the Lions, you know this team has continued to find ways to break historical curses. They've found motivation. They found grit in games where they've been able to dig deep and come back against adversity. And I still think that this is a team that can get back to and potentially win a Super Bowl this year, but they would have to go through potentially the Kansas City Chiefs to do that. But so far, they've looked like the most impressive team in the NFC this season. No disrespect to the Vikings, but here's why they're better than the Vikings. I think the run game is what's going to separate them, and then also Jared Goff playing at an MVP level. Who do you want to give the ball to, David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs? We don't know, but either one of them is going to get us a touchdown, which is a great problem to have. And then coming into the season, I heard some people doubting that Jameson Williams was going to be that reliable 2 for them, where this is a player you can use out of the backfield for them. He's ripping off 70-yard touchdowns, and he's a perfect complement to Amon-Ra St. Brown. When you have someone who can stretch the field like that, you have the most underrated receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's going to pick up those huge third downs. 3rd and 15, no problem for this Detroit Lions team. And Sam Laporta also getting better. You know who else is getting better on this team? Aiden Hutchinson and that defense. You go out there, get Carlton Davis. You have leadership in that secondary. You keep drafting very well every single year, which is what the Detroit Lions have done well. And then also having one of the greatest motivational speakers, not in just NFL history, maybe in human history. Go watch that Dan Campbell opening speech versus the Hard Knocks. On Hard Knocks, go watch Dan Campbell give that opening speech, and you want to tell me that this guy in a past life wasn't a war general? This wasn't a guy giving Braveheart-like speeches, getting people ready to run down a mountain, run down a hill, and go fight off the Romans and take back their land? You don't think that's who Dan Campbell is? No, that is who Dan Campbell is, and that's why the Lions are not going to fall off this year. That's why they are the number 2 team in football this year, and that's why I have them at number 2 according to the Brickyard. And the reason why they can't be number 1 is because the Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated so far this season, and honestly the Chiefs look the most impressive that they have all season, even without Rashee Rice on this team. And then they picked up Kareem Hunt, who looked serviceable for the Cleveland Browns last year, and he looked good for them. Juju Smith-Schuster came in and looked very solid, and I'm not worried about the Kansas City Chiefs. If I had to pick a team to go to and win the Super Bowl today, it would still be the Kansas City Chiefs to come out of the AFC, specifically because of we know what Patrick Mahomes can do. We know all about Travis Kelce and that offensive line, but the real engine behind this team the past 2 years has been Steve Spagnuolo, where he's given Patrick Mahomes the opportunity to relax a little bit. He knows he doesn't have to do too much, but this has consistently been a top 2 or 3 defense in the league this year. And over the past few years, the defense is really what carried them versus the Ravens, and this is the defending Super Bowl champ. So until they prove me otherwise in the playoffs, they are staying at number 1 this season unless Patrick Mahomes goes down. So at number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Beautiful. Beautiful list. Everything down to the last detail. You heard it here first. Brickyard's top 5 teams according to the Brickyard. We previewed every game. Whether it was Thursday night, Sunday night, or Monday night, we talked about it all. We talked about the spreads. We talked about the headlines. And we most importantly gave you the top 5 teams according to the Brickyard. Everything that's in there, you're not going to want to miss it. Make sure you tune in next week as we recap these games this upcoming week. Everything else here, absolutely exceptional, like always. Most importantly, though, message that we always want to bring to every show, no matter what it is, whether we're recapping, previewing, or anything in between, always and always
stay
Brig.